Welcome to the second annual Anne Arundel County Affordable Housing Symposium. I'm Heather East, the Executive Director of Chase Home. I want to thank the Chase Home Board of Trustees, the Chase Home staff, and St. John's Work Study students for bringing this event together. Hopefully it'll be a successful day, and I want to thank everybody for joining us in this very important discussion. I also want to thank our Diamond and Gold sponsors, Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, PNC Bank, Elm Street Development, ACDS, the ARC Central Chesapeake Region, Housing Commission of Anne Arundel County, Rosenberg, Martin Greenberg, and Whitting Turner. I also want to thank all our speakers for joining us today, and Symposium Advisor, Clifton Martin. Now introducing the City of Annapolis Mayor, Gavin Buckley.
I get to go first. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm just here to welcome you to Annapolis and say a huge thank you. It is great to be in a room full of Yimbys. Yes, in my backyard. It's something we don't hear very often in politics anymore. I've got a little anecdote for you from last night's council meeting. Not only are we a city full of NIMBYs, but last night we had a houseboat debate. And so we just returned from a country, Sweden, and I was in Denmark as well, and the year before we were in the Netherlands. And, the water is coming. These countries have embraced their water, and they've used it as a tool to provide some kind of housing. And I can tell you the people that were probably protesting the fear of houseboats and the sorts of people that would come on houseboats are probably the people that stand next to canal boats and take photos of themselves and embrace those kind of ideas in other countries. So I know you fight the good fight here. We know we're at a crossroads now where we know that we're going to have to do something. There's a critical shortage of housing in our nation, and somebody has to step up and somebody has to embrace a path forward so that we can house people. We have critical homelessness issues that we are all well aware of, and that's going to get exacerbated if we don't address this. We have a need for our next generation of kids to grow up with some hope that there's a chance that they can get into the housing market. The children I speak to today, the young people I speak to today, feel hopeless, and we have to change that. It's up to us, it's up to our generation to address that. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing in the City of Annapolis. I'd like to thank Melissa and the Housing Authority in the direction that we are heading, and this is the kind of money that is going to be going into affordable and subsidized housing, and some that's already been delivered. For any of you that know the housing landscape in the City of Annapolis, we're a city where everybody thinks that you either belong to a yacht club or you wear a bow tie and you're part of a historical society. My friends. But the reality is we have extreme wealth right next door to extreme poverty, and we have to address those things. And people generally of extreme wealth think that they bought $1 million house and that has given them the right to be insulated from poverty. Nobody buys that right. People who come to this city and are lucky enough to buy $1 million houses should be helping us and help people that are not as fortunate as themselves. But for the City of Annapolis, since I've been here, we've rebuilt Newtown as a $26 million development. We're on the road to redoing Morris Blum, around $50 million of reinvestment into that property. Woodside saw over $10 million of upgrades in recent times. We are very close to selecting the developer for our C&I initiative that is in Harbour House and Eastport Terrace. I'm very proud of the work that we've all done together to move the city forward. That's $300 million of investment there. The city is providing some additional space on Spa Road so that we can put some of that housing and distribute some of that housing to other parts of the city. People that get into some of that housing it will be transformative for us. It is mixed income housing and all the benefits that come with mixed housing developments. We know the sins of the past. Clearly, it is a bad business model to house all the poor people in one spot. What sort of idiots would think of a plan like that? And we are moving in a different direction because we have to give people opportunity. But that's $300 million of development. We have more money coming to Morris Plum. So for the city of Annapolis, as we move forward, nearly $500 million into affordable housing coming into the city. That is on top of millions of dollars that we're doing to create water access for some of these communities that have been cut off. What's going to be great about Harbour House and Eastport Terrace? People in that subsidized housing arena, some people will get waterfront views. That is going to make the people that bought their $1 million houses really mad. And I'm really excited about them getting really mad because, you know, everybody deserves a chance to live on the water, look at the water, enjoy the water, and come and appreciate the benefits that this city provides. So none of this would happen without the hard work of the people in this room. I, as the mayor of Annapolis, say a big heartfelt thank you for what you are doing to make this world a better place. Thank you and welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Mayor Buckley. Now I'm pleased to introduce Anne Arundel County Partnership for Youth, Children, and Families Executive Director, Pam Brown.
Good morning, everybody. I can hardly believe that it's a whole year since we all last met in this room, but here we are. For those of you who know me, you know that I am a data person. I spend large chunks of my time looking at data, and for those of you who follow Poverty Amidst Plenty, we have a new edition coming out. I am in the middle of the research, and some of you know that I've already talked to you about doing a key stakeholder or a focus group with me. I wish I could tell you that the news is good, particularly about homelessness. The news is not good, and I hope that you work with urgency this morning because I believe the situation is urgent, particularly for families and particularly for youth. They are the group, I think, that sort of get left behind when we think about homelessness because they are not well reported. Many families do not believe they are homeless when they are living in their cars. They are simply in a temporary condition. We have more families now living in hotels in this county with their children than we have ever done in any time in my 17 years here in the county. I feel that urgency. I am worried for the future. So I hope this morning you carry that with you in your hearts and your minds. With that, I get the real pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker this morning, Toni Pratt. I think of Toni not just as a real friend, but a soldier in the work. And the work really is to lift every child and family up in our county. No one does that better than Toni. She started her own consulting business many years ago. She is a woman of lived experience. She works with young women, lifting them, ensuring that they have a real future. She is an activist. She's a truth teller, and we're very, very lucky to have her here in this county. She's also injured this morning, so she's going to stand up, but I'm going to carry one of the mics over to her. So please welcome Toni Pratt.
Good morning, everyone. Don't you look beautiful? So I'm not the keynote speaker, but I'm here to give you a special presentation. And I'm looking around because this is what democracy looks like. Can you say that? This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. And I ask you to say that because for this election, we need to have one voice. One voice. Because let me tell you what's on the ballot. Freedom, or dictatorship. And the choice is yours. Last night, I sat on my couch and looked at CNN, and what I saw was a ballot box of votes burning. Burning, you hear me? This is what our world and our society has come to. When we can't reach across the aisle and make decisions together for the betterment of all people. This is what today's about. Guess why? Because housing is on the ballot. Our mayor talked about houseboats. Well, when you're sitting down today, think about houseboats right in residential areas where people are living with flooded homes, where people are living with the results of moisture and mold, and we get to go home and we get to live in our cozy little houses. That's on the ballot. Women's reproductive rights are on the ballot. How dare anybody tell us what we can do with our bodies? But if we don't get it right, they will. You know what else is on the ballot? John Lewis Voting Right Act. We didn't always have the right to vote. Our ancestors died for us to have the right to vote. Women didn't always have the right to vote. So look, if you haven't gone, get somebody and go. And I don't usually do this, but I'm going to do this today. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm scared. And if anybody knows me, it takes a lot to get me scared. I'm not just scared for me, but I'm scared for my grandchildren. And I'm scared for my soon-to-be-born great-grandchild. Because what happens on November 5th will affect all of us. Because whether we believe it or not, history is on the ballot in both ways. For the first time, if elected, we will have a 34-count convicted felon running the highest office in our land. But if we get it right, for the first time in my life, and probably I won't see it again, we will have a woman minority president. So the cost could not be higher. So as you sit here and look at me, look to your neighbor. You don't know what they might be going through. And if we don't get it right, this world is going to be a mess. Whether one person wins, it's going to be a mess. And whether one person loses, it's going to be a mess. But I look at democracy in here, and we've stood some tough times. And I believe that what happens, because guess what? For me, God is in control. Either way, He going to work it out for me, and I believe that. But we have to sit down and look at our integrity and look at what we believe and decide what is the best choice. So now I want everybody to chant with me before I sit down. We won't go back 3 times. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. Thank you.
Before I introduce the next speaker, I want to recognize our elected officials who are here this morning. We have Councilwoman Rodvien. I know Delegate Shaneka Henson is in the audience. I know Chair Pickard is in the audience, but I know there are other delegates. So please, delegates and senators and anyone else who's elected, I'm going to introduce my favorite elected. Anyone else I have missed, please stand up and introduce yourself. Oh. Sorry, Julian, I saw you as well. Still missed you. Is there anyone else? Okay, so on we go. And before on we go, I was struck by what Toni said and something about me. So I'm sure you all know I'm an immigrant. I'm a woman. I was born in England sometime after the war, but the war was really still alive in England, even though it had finished, and you can say we won. The spirit in England at that time was one of great optimism because we had defeated a common enemy. We had defeated fascism. It had not come to our shores. The cost of that was enormous in my country. Absolutely enormous, and enormous across the world. But the reason we did that was because we knew it was the right thing to do. So that takes me to County Executive Steuart Pittman, who I have had the honor to work with for 6 years. I would say he is the real stuff. He is a decent man. He is a kind man. He is an optimistic man. And that's what we need. And I ask you over the next few days to look inside yourself and always operate from a position of kindness and a position of optimism. And that way, we will build a future that my parents fought for and my father died for. So with that, I introduce County Executive Steuart Pittman.
So we started out on a little bit of a political note, and now you've got a politician. So I do want to keep the politics of housing at the forefront of our minds as we talk about the state of housing in Anne Arundel County. That's what I've been asked to do, as well as to introduce Jake Day, Secretary of Housing and Community Development, who sponsored this section, so I have to make sure that everything I say is exactly the way Jake would say it. But we generally agree on everything, so that'll be good. A lot of people have looked at Anne Arundel County or from around the state and said, wow, what happened? Y'all are doing some things on housing in particular. Y'all are doing some things that we wish we could do in our counties. And I get to see, and I know Councilwoman Pickard gets to see on the legislative committee of MACO, and Councilwoman Hummer and Rodvien have also seen it when they've gone to MACO conferences, that other counties, that's the Maryland Association of Counties, are spending a lot of time opposing some of the things that Secretary Day are asking them to do, and saying, we don't really think that we should give density bonuses for development that has affordable units, or we really don't think that the state should be telling us how to manage the land in our counties. And I know that the three of us on the council and myself have gone to MACO meetings and sort of said, well, you know, when you don't do the right thing, maybe sometimes the next level of government has to tell you what the right thing is, and if you don't want to take credit for it, you can always blame them. And maybe we should just go along with some of the good things that Secretary Day and his team are proposing. And some of that happened this last year, and I hope that we're going to hear some more about what's going to happen in the coming years. But at the county level, I want to say that I'm going to go through some things that we've done, and I'm going to go through some things that I think we need to do. But I want to also talk a little bit about the how we pulled it off. And for me personally, you know, I questioned in my first term whether what I intended to do, what I wanted to do on housing, on fighting poverty, was really Anne Arundel County, and whether maybe I would just be a one-term county executive and get as much done as I could. You know, maybe I should be thinking about something else after the first term. But over that first 4 years, we seemed to build a coalition. We seemed to get groups together that really started to believe that affordable housing was a moral obligation to create. And while this is the county that before 2018 was about to get hit with a fair housing lawsuit, I saw the letter. Some of y'all were involved in that probably, preparing to go after our county for our failure to address affordable housing. We were the county that wasn't even supporting low-income housing tax credit applications when they went to the state. The county executive just didn't sign on and support. And so we didn't get many, and we weren't producing much. We were the county that had a workforce housing density bonus and got rid of it because there was a workforce housing project that was going to go on Ritchie Highway up in Severn Park, and folks came out and they figured out that the best way to kill that project was to just kill that bill. They got away with it, and they thought it was good politics. So after 2018, when we started to do some things, we first started to do some rental assistance that we hadn't done before. In my first budget, I asked the team, what can we do quickly that could actually be implemented? And additional rental assistance was simple and easy. We immediately, as quick as we could, the council got together and said, let's bring back that workforce housing density bonus, that workforce housing bill, and let's make it even stronger, and let's use it. And we did that. It was a 4-3 vote, so it was partisan, but we had 4 Democrats, and before we had 3 Democrats. So that was the difference there. The thing that I think we did that was the most impactful was the Housing Trust Fund. And thanks to recovery money from COVID, we were able to seed a housing trust fund to be able to help with housing production, really very flexible source of funds controlled by Anne Arundel Community Development Services and Erin Karpewicz and her team that could be used to close the gap when the numbers weren't working on a production project, but it also could be used to preserve housing that was threatened with no longer being affordable. After we got it going, we put into our budget a change in how our real estate transfer tax was done. We increased the real estate transfer tax in the county on properties that sell for over $1 million. It wasn't our idea. It had been done in some other cities and some jurisdictions. It was opposed by the realtors and the folks who deal with these large properties because it was an increase. But we got that done thanks to the 4 Democrats on the council, and that's been about $7.5 million a year. We believe it'll be a good $10 million a year as the market comes back, and that is been the key and the reason why we now do have a lot of, in fact, this year we had 7 multifamily affordable projects closed just in 2024, and we couldn't have done that without the Housing Trust Fund money to step up and help close the gap on some of these projects. That's really, really big. It's still a drop in the bucket. I mean, I'm really proud of what we've done, but I'm really frustrated by the fact that Pam Brown can get up here and say that there are more families living in hotels with kids than ever in her career. So lots more work to do. We also did a study, ACDS did a study, showing our needs for income levels and our shortage of housing. I think for folks at 60,000 60% of AMI and below, we're 12,000 units short for sure, and that's a lot of units to make up. We did an accessory dwelling unit bill. It was Councilman Rodvien's bill that allows accessory dwelling units to be built, but we still need to get them built, and we can talk about that, have some ideas. We completed redevelopment of most of our Housing Commission of Anne Arundel County public housing stock, the RAD program, and thank you, Cliff Martin, who's here, who's left there, but still doing the work. Amazing. We know that the city of Annapolis has got a plan to do all of their units as well. We did Plan 2040, which was the 20-year development plan, smarter, greener, more equitable, and we created regions and stakeholder advisory committees in all those regions. And one of the things that I'm most proud about that in relation to affordable housing, I've met with the leaders of the stakeholder advisory committees. These are citizen groups who are just finishing the process, and they all say that, man, did we learn a lot from the planning staff about priorities. And one of the things I asked them all was, what about affordable housing? And you have people who are against it and people who are for it, and how did that all go? While those were difficult conversations in these regions, they all came out feeling like there is now a group of people who is involved in the process who really understands it from a planner's perspective and looks at the big picture. And I think these groups of people who've been educated through that stakeholder process are going to be an army that's going to support a lot of the work that we need to do in this county in the future. And then last and not least, we created, after 20 years, it's 20 years since it was first introduced by Pam Beidel, Senator Pam Beidel, a moderately priced dwelling unit program in the county. And so all new development of 10 units or more, 10 to 20 units, you can pay into the fee in lieu in some cases, but pretty much all of them will have, if it's homeownership, 10% of their units affordable, and if it's rental, 15% of their units. One of the strongest bills in the state. There's been a debate over whether or not this is the right kind of policy, whether we should have mandates on all developers saying that you got to be part of this solution. And in some places it hasn't worked. In Baltimore City, it didn't produce units. The reason that it did work in Montgomery County and it will work in Anne Arundel County is that developers want to build here. We have a good market, and that means that the government is in a position to negotiate. So we have negotiated environmental restrictions, stormwater, forest conservation, and we can do it on affordable housing. And it's been a difficult process, but we got it done just recently. Councilwoman Pickard led a group that brought a bill forward, and that bill passed just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I lose track of time. So yes, let's have a round of applause for that. So that will create some units that wouldn't have been created before. Here's some things that we still have left to do, I believe, some things that are high on my list. And one is zoning, getting back to what the state has been encouraging and sometimes mandating a little bit, mostly encouraging counties to do, being very careful. But we can do more, and we have done more, and we will do more. So, we've all heard about exclusionary zoning, and we know how neighborhoods have been segregated, and it's been in the zoning code, has been used to do that. And we know that we're trying to do inclusionary zoning to reverse that. So in Anne Arundel County, it's still illegal to do mobile homes. The code still has remnants of it that make it really hard, even if a developer does want to do smaller, more sustainable, and thereby more affordable units. And so the MPDU bill has some of that. It allows in R1 neighborhoods, low-density neighborhoods, duplex, triplexes, and quads in the MPDU program. And it changes how density is calculated for the MPDU program. There's more that we can do. You hear missing middle. Councilwoman Pickard did a whole conference on missing middle a couple of years. It's been 2 or 3 years by now. Frustrating that not much has been done, but we can go into areas where we don't even think of them as being the stuff in our plan, transit-oriented development, all that. And we can figure out ways of doing affordable housing. I mean, if you look at South County, a rural area, there's been more displacement due to the mansions that get built there than now. The agricultural economy had a lot of folks in it who live in South County. They got pushed into mobile home parks because they can't afford the housing that gets built there. When their homes get older, they move out. This is also happening in Edgewater. Smaller homes that are getting old, it happens all over. We have to preserve the housing that we've got, and we displace people, and the only thing that you can really build is, the cookie cutter, single family, large homes, or more expensive homes. So we can do things in our zoning code that will create affordability, and it doesn't cost us a dime. In addition to the MPDU bill. Maintaining the affordable stock is something I think we don't talk about enough. I know there are people here who live in a mobile home park on Ritchie Highway that was going to be redeveloped for housing that they would not be able to afford. It's mostly seniors in that mobile home park. And they got saved. A new owner came in who really wants to keep it as it is, and I was there not long ago, and they're making improvements, and that's awesome. We have a bunch of mobile home parks in South County down near Lothian that the land was rezoned to R5. The owners know that they could build townhomes there and make a lot of money. There's a real threat because their wastewater system is going into the Patuxent River and polluting it, and they say they can't afford to fix it. So you can see how those places could be closed down, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of residents living down there. So we have our public works folks working on a plan to take over that wastewater system. And yeah, it's going to mean that it's going to go into everybody's rates, but it could be the difference between losing those mobile home parks and maintaining those mobile home parks. And then public housing. The mayor mentioned something about the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis. Melissa Maddox-Evans is here and has written into the Capitol about the financial crisis that they're facing, the layoffs that they've had to do. It's becoming almost impossible to operate, and the units that are not actually inspected and approved and therefore are not collecting rent. So a group of electeds has been getting together talking about this. We went to Cliff Martin because he's been running housing authorities since he was born, I think, and recently retired and is now consulting. And he's been working with Melissa and others to put together a recovery plan. You could call it a bailout plan, a plan to get the housing authority to the point where they can do those redevelopments in the interim, not collapse and basically lose the housing. So you will be hearing a lot more about that very soon. I think there's a good plan in the works, and I think Anne Arundel County is going to have to step in financially to help with that, to preserve that housing. I think we need to accelerate the accessory dwelling units. There's a lot of units that could be built, and I think what it's going to take is for the county to pre-approve a certain kind of ADU and then market the hell out of it. Every single homeowner out there who's got a yard and has got some space could become an affordable housing developer of one unit if they do this, and so we have to market it in an aggressive way. That's on the list. I haven't talked to my staff a lot about that one. I hope I'm not surprising anybody. I think that we have a lot of nonprofits in this room, and they're trying to grow their capacity to do housing development. Arundel Community Development Services is the organization that works with you on your projects, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I have been told recently that we knew that we created in a budget a new position, the Chief Affordable Housing Officer, and I knew that ACDS was recruiting and interviewing, and I was told just very recently that a woman that many of you know, you know about this, Jake. Okay, good. Jake's not happy about this. Her name is Nori Suter. Honora is her real name. She works for the AG, but she's been at Housing Community Development, the key person who puts together all these deals at the state level. Will be the Chief Affordable Housing Officer at ACDS for Anne Arundel County, starting first of the year, right? All right. So if you operate across the state and you're really upset that Nori's leaving the state, it means you have to operate in Anne Arundel County, so you get to do your deals with Nori. I'm really excited about that. I mean, we have not had a person full-time who really can work with these nonprofits and for-profit developers to put together the deals that really are going to make a difference. So that's going to be helpful. We have land. I know how long have I been going? I don't want to take up all Jake's time. Okay, I'm gonna move it along here. We have land that is available to create communities, like not just a little house here and a little house there, but the Bell Grove landfill, 7409 B&A Boulevard, which is county-owned property that there's an RFP that has just gone out for developers to create a community there. And Laurel Racetrack, which ain't going to be a racetrack anymore, in case you haven't heard, after they run the Preakness there in 26, then they're going to shut the place down. And everything will move to Pimlico once Pimlico is done, if everything goes according to plan. But the Stronach Group owns it, Canadian company, and they've hired Design Collective, the same folks who did our Crownsville master plan and have done a lot of urban planning and design, to make a plan. They're working with Amy Gowan at Economic Development to come up with a community at that large parcel of land right next to a MARC station. So wonderful transit-oriented development that we should all be thinking about how we can get affordability put into that. We also have the Cromwell Station, which is just north of 7409 B&A Boulevard, of just a few blocks walking, has land there that could be used for more housing. And then, of course, we have the Odenton MARC Station for transit-oriented, where we're putting in the structured parking so that will create space that is now surface parking that can be housing. So there's opportunity. Some people think that Anne Arundel County is all built out. Not so. We have a team, economic development. Amy Gowan, in case you did not know, started her career at a homeless shelter and then did affordable housing and then did this, that, and the other political work, and then was a planner, the director of planning at Howard County before becoming economic development director. So we have, on that end of things, we have a housing advocate, Jenny Dempsey at Plan and Zoning. I didn't know just how passionate she was about housing until watching some of these bills before the council and how passionate she is about that. She's a real ally. Erin Karpewicz, of course, is our superstar at ACDS Nori Suter is going to be huge in this. Jansen Evelyn on my staff has been shepherding through a lot of this work. We do have a team in Anne Arundel County that can make this happen and make the numbers bigger. And we are doing a 5-year plan. ACDS is doing it, and you can participate right after lunch. Their 5-year housing strategy, and it's going to be more robust than in the past. It's not just their strategy; it's the county strategy, and you'll see all of county agencies getting involved. So the last thing I want to say is that to continue this work long-term in this county, which is still a purple county, becoming bluer and bluer as we go. Unfortunately, housing has been a partisan issue, very much a partisan issue. Y'all saw, the things that were said in the last election about housing and how horrible it was that, Pittman and the Democrats were doing payment in lieu of taxes for housing, affordable housing, and basically, one party has refused to vote yes on most of our housing bills. And so we need to keep the coalition together that I think we have built, and community engagement on everything hard has always been essential. We have environmental advocates in this county that often are pitted against housing advocates, but we have some that are really good progressive people who have supported some of our housing bills, and we want to keep them in the fold to the extent that we can. We have an organization that is a coalition of neighborhood organizations called Growth Action Network. Some people are here, who a few years ago always opposed anything that was development. It was sort of an anti-development organization. It's evolved, and it's been extraordinary that they've supported all of the recent housing legislation that we've done, and I meet with them quarterly, and they've been, the tone of the conversation has been very different, and I met with them this week, and it was how can we get more density so we can get more housing in these areas? Really an extraordinary shift, and I think that's part of the whole small area committee, the region committees, and the community engagement in the process. Everybody's getting educated and moving in a direction. So if we are going to succeed, we have to hold that coalition together. I also want to mention an organization called ACT, Anne Arundel Connecting Together, that has been at every council meeting with their shirts on, loud, loud and proud. We would not be here doing these things without that engagement and all of these groups working together. So I brag about that around the state all the time, that we've built this amazing coalition, and we've got the teachers union supporting housing bills, and we've got people really focusing on it. And so my job and the job of everybody who does this work is to keep that majority coalition together. And if everything we does has the affordability piece in it, I think we win. You've seen the polls that the community college has done on attitudes, public attitudes on local issues. The Anne Arundel Community College poll comes out twice a year. And they've asked people how they feel about development, and they say, well, we have too much development in Anne Arundel County. And then they ask people how they feel about affordable housing, and they say, we need more affordable housing. And so when we came out of COVID really with a little bit more of a heart and a little bit more caring about one another, I think. That's my optimistic view of it. And when the housing work we do is about affordable and workforce housing, essential worker housing, I think we win. I think we get enough of a moral position that is right that people are now afraid to come out against it. When it is just about, we want more growth, we want more development, we want the supply side angle of it. People are frustrated when they see the stuff on Riva Road at $4,000 a month, or South County, all the new development being mansions. And it's almost like we have an unlimited supply of very wealthy, very mobile people who will move to our beautiful, wonderful county on the Chesapeake Bay and buy that stuff or rent that stuff at those prices all day long. For our people, our essential workforce that keeps our economy strong, this is an economic development issue, and the businesses are saying we need housing that our workforce can afford. So those, to me, are the political, the organizing, the messaging points that we have to stick with to win long-term. And I won't be here in a couple more years doing this. I'll probably be on the outside advocating with y'all to get whoever is in my job to do it, but we got a lot of work to do, and it's going to be a long, long road, so stick with it. Thank you for being here. All right, so I get to introduce Secretary Jake Day. I was really thrilled when when the governor appointed him to this position, because I had first met Jake when he was speaking at a Smart Growth conference, and it was really the first elected official I'd ever heard. He was mayor of Salisbury at the time. Really talk about smart growth in a way that I understood the politics of it, not just the theory of it, and I found out later that he had worked both for a land preservation open space organization on the Eastern Shore, but also been educated as a planner, happened to be the mayor of Salisbury, doing incredibly what I considered brave things to increase production of housing, and knows this issue from every angle. So we're really lucky that for the second year in a row we've had Jake here, and that we have him leading all the housing efforts in the state of Maryland. Come on up.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Look, I don't know why I brought my notes up here, because after Steuart, your talk, I feel like we should just have a conversation and just keep this thing going. Also, I want to note that Lisa gave me a note for us. Where did Lisa go? Oh, she's right there. For us on ADUs. So, look, we're cooking. State and county collaboration, council and executive. We're making things happen. We're passing notes. You know, teacher didn't catch us. Teacher didn't catch us. Teacher wrote it. There you go. That's right. Yes. So look, it is great to be with you this morning, and you know, I'm so proud that I get to represent not only the Moore Miller administration, but also the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development and the 550 or so folks that work there and work their tail off every single day to support housing production, small business development, broadband, infrastructure financing, and more around this state. We've got an incredible team, including Nori Suter. Congratulations, Anne Arundel County. And Mr. Executive, if I ever have the opportunity to return the favor, trust that I will. So, you know, I'm going to start recruiting out of Anne Arundel County. I'm kidding. No, I'm not. Look, when I was appointed secretary, I set a goal to visit every Maryland county. We knocked that out pretty quickly. So then the goal became to spend a day and a half, you know, do deep dives in each county. We called them day trips. I don't know who came up with the name, but you know, I guess my name affords lots of pun creation out of it. And those day trips, you know, during those day trips, we spend time touring different parts of counties. We have time with municipal leaders, with county elected officials, the expert staff. We were in Anne Arundel County in April, just after the Key Bridge collapse. And so we got to not only tour some really critical things that were aspirational and that were objectives of council members and the council chair and the county executive and staff, but we also got to talk to some of the businesses and see some of the areas that were going to be affected. Maybe hadn't yet, but were going to be affected by the Key Bridge collapse. We know that has had regional impact and will continue to. And so I was reminded in that day that we're united. And we are one team working to address critical challenges and to resource the key aspirations of our communities. And when I say our communities, it's easy at the state level to think of our communities as, you know, the man who's the executive, right? The women who are the council members, the people in the departments. But you know, and you said it, Steuart, you know, it's the people out there every day who want to be here, who choose this place, and who struggle to be able to afford to live in housing that exists in these communities. And that's because we're not making more of it. We're not taking care of what we got. And we're not making it easy enough for the people who live here to be able to put food on the table, pay their bills, pay their rent, pay their utilities, and we ought to do a better job. And it starts with vision. And I want to emphasize that point in this place because I can feel it coming out of Anne Arundel County. I can see it and I can feel it. I've got numbers, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We can talk about projects and our role and what's been accomplished, but the vision that you have is crystal clear. And it's one where you want to honor and respect the beautiful landscape that you've been entrusted to protect. You want to honor our bay. You want to honor your farms and your forests, your rivers, your streams. You also want to honor the people that come to work every day, in some cases for county government, which I think probably actually pays better than state government. It must. It must. Like, why else? All right, I'm gonna get off that point. You threw me for a loop, Steuart. I had buried that yesterday, and it's like right here. So, but it's also the people that come to work in our small businesses. It's the people who aspire to open a small business. Maybe they knew that, their grandmother, their grandfather were able to have a business in that neighborhood, And things have changed. They've gotten harder. They've gotten harder on families. They've gotten harder on people. We've got neighborhoods in this county, right? We've got neighborhoods in this county that were once concentrated with strong districts of black business ownership that have been decimated, that are boarded up, closed windows. We've got neighborhoods decimated with vacancy. That's not just a Baltimore City condition. That exists right here. That exists right here. And like I said, we've got to do more. That day, that visit, one of the places we stopped by was North Odenton. And we saw Blue Oaks, which is a project that the state has invested in. I drive by there. I drive near there pretty regularly when I go to Fort Meade now. An example of how the state is investing in this place. Look, we've got a shortage, a critical shortage, and there aren't a lot of tools to address it. The mayor asked I think it was supposed to be a rhetorical question earlier. What idiot, I think was the question, what idiot decided to concentrate poverty through our housing policies? Well, the United States Congress, I think, is that idiot. I say that, with no sense of disregard for many of the individuals that represent us and work very hard there, or those that will. But collectively, federal housing policy continues to shortchange our communities. And federal housing policy shapes most of what we can do. And that trickles down to state housing policy, and that trickles down to county and municipal housing policy. And so what we're left with is a policy landscape designed to do the harm that people intentionally wanted to do many years ago. It's not by mistake. It was intentional. It was by design. It's absolutely by design. And the only way we unwind that is through deliberate counteraction, a redesign, through designing policy that says, nope, if the intent was to segregate, our intent will be to unite. It will be to integrate. If the intent was to push people from one place to another, our intent will be to drive opportunity for them to come home. That is the only way. So with 96,000 housing units short, we have a tall order in front of us. I don't think all this work gets done in the neat little package of 4-year increments. Steuart, I think you embody that in how you have carried yourself not only, in term one, but term two, and it's not about the next election, right? It's not. It's about setting us on a path to be the county and the state that we know we ought to be for the people that live here. So we've got skyrocketing housing prices. We've got skyrocketing rents. Since 2010, increased 37 and 32% 32 and 37% respectively. 65% of Marylanders say they recognize, 65% say they recognize that excessive regulation is playing a role in making it difficult for them to afford their housing. You just heard a litany of ways in which one county is saying, we have a vision to make it easier. Not wholesale, not rape and pillage our land, not destroy communities for the sake of another housing unit that might be unaffordable to most, but we can strike a balance. 99% of Marylanders ages 18 to 34 said it is less affordable for them than it was their parents to live in Maryland. Not just own a home, but to even choose this place. And you heard the county executive say, people want to be here. People want to choose here. But most of them are telling you, most young people growing up here, watching us, now that I'm not in the 18 to 34 year bracket anymore, still feel like I am sometimes, but they're watching us and saying, you had it better than I had it. I know when I was 18, I couldn't have imagined that a Marylander or an American would be able to say that it would be harder on them than it was on me. And what's the effect? The State of the Economy report earlier this year said we are getting outpaced not only by our neighbors, but by the rest of America. It is crushing Maryland's economy, and we're all going to feel it. And there are bright spots in our economy, and this is one of them, but we're all going to feel it eventually when our workforce has to move out of state to be able to afford to work here. They'll choose the commuting cost. Voters are telling us that. They'll choose the commuting cost. That has disastrous climate implications. That has disastrous implications for where people get involved in their community, for how much they participate in civic action, for whether or not they give a damn what goes on at night in the place that they leave every day at 5 o'clock. You better believe that this is an existential problem for us. And so what you saw in the 2024 General Assembly session was Governor Moore saying, okay, enough. I see it. This is critical to every Maryland family, and we're going to start now. And so with the governor's 3 bills, we started. And I want to say that I think our final scorecard on this, with bipartisan support across both chambers, all 3 of those bills getting passed, our scorecard says we did more on housing this year than state government has ever done in a single year. There's no question. We simply have treated housing as if it's either not worthy of the governor's leadership historically, or it's the third rail. I don't know which, but that's how we've treated housing. But the imperative is before us. And the governor said, all right, we lead. With the Housing Expansion Affordability Act, we will create density bonuses, not only for the low-hanging fruit of state-owned land, state-owned campuses, but also those obvious places where it should be easier to produce housing. Nonprofit-owned land, helping our nonprofit organizations, churches, hospitals, college campuses. And then the places where we should be building, where we should be incentivizing housing, in proximity to transit. And it also said, hey, what's the end goal again? Oh, the end goal is to make it affordable. What's one of the easiest ways that we can make it affordable? Say, by right, across the state of Maryland, the second I sign my pen to this piece of paper on this bill, manufactured and modular housing is allowed across the state. And so that's a little mentioned aspect of the Housing Expansion and Affordability Act. Allowed across the state now. The second piece of legislation was the Housing Community Development Financing Act. What this did was it said, hey, those communities where we have concentrated poverty, those communities where we have disinvested over time, we ought to do more to bring resources there. And so one of the things it did was it stood up the Maryland Community Investment Corporation, which is tasked with drawing tens of millions of dollars per year in federal dollars into low-income communities in Maryland. Yesterday, the board met again. We recently elected our leadership of the board. The comptroller and I are chair and vice chair. We hired a CEO. We're hiring staff. We're off to the races. We're going to be pursuing new markets tax credits. And we've got a board and an advisory board being built out that includes members, residents of the low-income communities that we are looking to support. By the way, if you have additional names, anybody interested in participating on the board, raise your hand. I'm looking for names. Come see me afterward. Okay, let's talk. And then the third bill, the Renters' Rights and Stabilization Act, says this. It says there's no time to wait. There's no time to wait for development. There's no time to wait for production. People are hurting today. And so we've got to change the landscape. And so the Renters' Rights and Stabilization Act does a number of things. Number one, it says, Maryland, you're out of step with America on evictions. We have the highest eviction filing rate in the country by far. We also have the lowest eviction filing fee in the country. There is a correlation. And so let's address that. So we increased it from $8 to $50. In addition to that, those funds will help people, will help bring legal resources to people who find themselves in that David versus Goliath situation of facing an eviction. In addition, it establishes the Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs. This is the first element of state government to say we have a role in assisting people who find themselves being treated unfairly. And so we're going to be involved now. Its first project, its first responsibility is to draft and launch a statewide tenants' bill of rights, which will be an addendum, a required addendum to every single lease signed in this state. And the way I know this works is, and it has value and helps educate people on the rights that exist, is we had it in Salisbury for 25 years. Didn't get rid of rentals in Salisbury. It didn't make landlords choose to leave the city and go out of business. Montgomery County's had it for many years. So a lot of the rhetoric you may have heard around that, if you heard it, was incorrect. It also closes the first and last month rent loophole by lowering the security deposit maximum, the collective amount that can be charged for security deposit upfront in total to 1 month's rent. Fees, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. The average in Maryland that somebody had to show up with on the first month that they moved in was $5,400. How many people have even that liquidity available to them? Not many. Not many. Maybe those working for county government. I don't know. I'm going to stop. I swear I'm going to stop. And it also created a statewide right of first refusal and tenant opportunity to purchase. So it actually did, an A and a B option and 2 bites at the apple to ensure that renters could become homeowners and that we can help people who see the opportunity right there and want to seize it, help them grasp it. So those are the 3 gubernatorial bills that you've probably heard a lot about. And I do just want to bring this back to the deliberate nature of our work moving forward to repair communities, to be the great places that they can be. We had a departmental bill that we ran this year called the Just Communities Act. Just communities are now a new designated geography within the state. These are the places that were deliberately damaged with racist housing policy, the places that were deliberately, like redlining, the places that were deliberately damaged with urban highway construction, and even the seeming reinvestment efforts like urban renewal dollars that erased communities and neighborhoods and robbed places of the wealth that they had built. We're going to counteract that work. It's going to be hard. We're being advised by the thought leaders in the country, the Urban American Cities Collaborative, the Just City Lab out of Harvard, and we have the first in the nation Assistant Secretary of Just Communities, the first in the nation Division of Just Communities, the first in the nation designation of just communities and just places. And oh, by the way, these are the unjust places. These are the places where injustices were visited upon them that we need to, in an aspirational way, turn into places of justice. We've got a lot of work to do, and we want to do it right. It's going to take a lot of listening. The last thing we want to do is be the white knight who shows up and says, we've got the answers, we'll figure it out, we'll dump money into these places, and that'll solve everything. So it's going to be a process to do this right and to do it carefully. But we are off to the races. And the General Assembly gave sweeping powers to the governor to prioritize any state program, to prioritize just communities in any state program. There is nothing else like that in statute. And we had near unanimity for that legislation. So I want to provide a little bit of a window into 2025, a little bit, because I'm not allowed to give a full view yet. But if you look at the budget last year, it'll tell you where the governor's priorities are. In a year where the state budget faced immense challenges, shrank by 5%, we saw a 170% increase in our capital programs. In that same year, we saw a doubling of rental housing funding, a doubling of the money available to produce affordable housing. All of these things are designed to help us unclog the pipeline of affordable housing production and to help make great places that people love and want to invest their dollars in. At the end of the day, we know state government in general, is not going to have enough resources to achieve all of our visions. So it's incumbent upon us to build the places that other people want to invest in, that other people want to be a part of, that the private sector says, us too. We want a part of it too. So this coming year, you will see us continue to beat the drum of producing more affordable housing, producing housing in the right places, in the right ways, for the people that want to be here. Recently, Governor Moore and I participated in an event, and you heard, I think you heard the mayor speak about YIMBYs. And he referenced this as a room full of YIMBYs. I don't know if you'd call yourselves YIMBYs, I won't ask for hands, but that notion of saying yes, that notion of saying yes to something, it's a hard thing. To my council members, to my executive, you know what it's like to walk through the grocery store and have somebody say to you, you got to stop that thing from happening. You can't let that happen. It's going to change my neighborhood. Those are such easy messages as human beings to deliver. And they're really hard messages as elected officials to have foisted upon you. Because you want to listen. You always want to listen. There's value in whatever people are sending your way. You got to filter, but there's value in whatever people are sending your way. And so saying yes is a really difficult thing. Getting people excited and motivated to come out and speak at a council meeting. I don't even know what time are the council meetings? 7 p.m. You're not going to get me out at 7 p.m. I got to put my girls to bed, feed them, we got gymnastics and dance. To get people out and excited to say, yes, let's make that thing happen. It doesn't really affect me. It affects them, but I should say yes because it tangentially makes life better for all of us. That's tough. That's tough. But there is a groundswell of Americans that are starting to say, yeah, but we have to. Yeah, but there's no other way. Because if we're left to only making project-by-project decisions, government process is going to take longer and longer. There are all sorts of reasons to say no to this or that. And then collectively, we are going to find ourselves having not dug our way out of this hole. And we're going to stay in it. And we're not going to move. So 2025, if it's going to be about anything, it's going to be about saying, we got to take that broader view. We got to take that broader view. Our economy depends upon it, and our people depend upon it. And so this is a year where if you thought 2024 was the year of housing, let me tell you something. It's a multi-year thing. It ain't over. We are still going to be at it. We are still going to be working on it. This chapter has not closed. And it's going to take all of us collectively working together. All of your voices rising in Annapolis. Not a long commute for you. But it's going to take all of us rising together to say, we aren't done. We can't claim victory off of one legislative session. We have to rise together to do more. And if there is any place that I am certain the vision and the tenacity exists to show up in droves at the State House, it is Anne Arundel County. Thank you all for that. Thank you for that. And thanks for letting me be with you this morning.
Thank you, Secretary Day, for your deliberate words, your optimism, your sense of urgency. Very much appreciated. We are moving on to our first panel now. Very exciting. Can you come up, please, first panel? This is sponsored by Elm Street Development. Thank you, Elm Street. And Erin Karpewicz is our moderator.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to go ahead and get started as my panelist if everyone can come on up. Great to see so many folks here. I've got my great ACDS team. I see Partnership for Children, Youth, and Family team members, Housing Commission members, lots of developer partners, and our nonprofit partners, all who I know are really working hard to promote affordable housing opportunities, end homelessness, and really provide the supports that are needed to get people into housing. I think we all believe that housing is a basic human right, full stop. That's what we need, and we need affordable housing, we need safe housing, we need attainable housing. I do think, as Secretary Day said, we need to broaden the conversation sometimes when you're talking to other community members. And so I think that's kind of, one of the motivations for today's panel discussion is affordable housing and economic development, because sometimes when you're talking to some elected officials, not our elected officials here today, but others, they have to think, well, like, what's in it for me? What's in it for the tax base? What's in it for the employers that we need in our jurisdictions or in our state? So that is the topic of our panel today. Before I give a little bit of background and introduce a few statistics, I'm not going to get into it a lot. I want to just quickly introduce our panel presenters, and I'm going to go through them briefly, each one. Then I'm going to give a couple statistics, and then we'll let each person have a few minutes to talk, and then if we have time, we'll do some questions. So first, I'm pleased to introduce Amy Gowan, who is the CEO of Anne Arundel County Economic Development Corporation. As County Executive Pittman said, prior to her work in leading planning departments and now the Economic Development Agency here in Anne Arundel County, she had deep experience running homeless shelters in California and also working on HUD housing policy, which is great. That's great. You could be at ACDS. So that's great. We work with that all the time. Next, I'd like to welcome Councilwoman Allison Pickard, who chairs the County Council right now. She represents the 2nd District and is serving in her 2nd term. She's been a champion on a number of bills that make it easier to build workforce housing, and also supported the Housing Trust Fund, bills to include payment in lieu of taxes, and as County Executive Pittman most recently, she really led the charge with her awesome colleagues on the council to support the Housing Attainability Act, and I think she'll talk a little bit more about that when she presents. Next, we have Delegate Shaneka Henson, who represents District 30A in Annapolis. She is in the House of Delegates, where she's been serving since 2019. Delegate Henson is a passionate advocate, not just for affordable housing, but safe and healthy housing. She sponsored a number of bills there that focus on the quality and safety of the housing. And she's also supported, the housing affordability bills that in the governor's housing package that Secretary Day mentioned, and budget priorities to increase the amount of affordable housing funds at the state level. And finally, last but not least, Tom Coale. Tom is a partner with the Maryland lobbying firm of Perry, White, Ross, and Jacobson, where he serves as a Maryland lobbyist representing clients including affordable housing developers and the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition. Tom is an experienced land use and zoning attorney with experience in the greater Baltimore area and has published numerous editorials about housing and zoning issues. So please help me give a warm welcome to our panelists. Oh, I see. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to do this. Sorry, Kayla. Okay. Is it? Oh, it's on these.
Right here. Right here.
Oh, got you. But I know it's not on this one, but okay. Got it. Okay, so go back then. Okay, so I'm not going to go into a lot of statistics. Everyone here knows there's a huge housing need, but just to set the table so we understand what we're talking about when we talk about affordable housing initiatives, I want to just share a little bit of data. We know that 28,000 low and moderate income renter households live here in Anne Arundel County. 77% of those are cost burden. That means that they're paying more than 30% of their income for housing costs. That's money that they can't use for medicines or groceries or other essentials, much less discretionary spending in the surrounding communities. We know that during the pandemic, we lost a lot of affordable housing as rents on market rate properties or naturally occurring properties just increased, where they don't have government subsidies or deed restrictions that restrict the income that can be charged. So in 2019, we were about 10,000 units short for households earning 60% of area median income. In 2022, that report that County Executive Pittman mentioned, we're almost to 12,500 units short. So we lost, some of the loss there was about 1,600 units. We lost 1,600 market rate units. So we need to think about preservation when we think about also how do we fill that gap, because we can't just keep losing the units we already have. Just my slide shows a little bit of information about what that means. So if you look, if you're earning 60% of area median income, if you're a household of 3, you're earning about $60,000 per year. That means you can afford $1,650 a month, which that's not super affordable, but that's about 30% of your income. And similarly, if you're making 30% of AMI, you can be earning around $32,000 a year, and you would be able to afford about $825 a month in housing cost. And you can see, thanks to Amy's staff, they gave me some occupations, kind of what the median annual salary is for some different occupations, service workers, maintenance workers, construction workers, people in the service industry. It's really difficult for people to afford homes here in the county. Also, on the home ownership front, we are second only to Howard County in terms of the highest median home sales price and the lowest months of housing supply that we have in our inventory when you look at the Baltimore region. So to afford a typically priced home in Anne Arundel County, a household here would need to earn an income of about $164,000 per year. That's almost $100,000 more than the 60% median income. So, you know, on people earning 60%, we want them to be able to achieve the dream of home ownership, but, you know, first we need to get them into affordable rental housing so that they can save. And of course, these statistics, you know, it's just increased the disparity between white home ownership rates and home ownership rates for families of color. We see that in our housing counseling program that we operate at Arundel Community Development Services. So with that doomsday outlook, I'm going to turn to my colleagues and ask them just to kind of give a little insight on what you think we need to do and how this is all tied together with economic development.
Thank you so much, Erin. Hi, everyone. Amy Gowan with Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation. And as a number of the speakers mentioned, I used to do this. I used to do a lot of affordable housing work at the policy level and boots on the ground in San Diego, California, where housing prices are really high. And in Maryland, I worked in the regulatory side, overseeing planning and zoning, and now I get to be a facilitator. So I'm very excited to be back in this space, having housing conversations, which I haven't been able to do in a while. And on that note, I always like to start, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but I always like to start with just a very simplistic jobs housing balance and why it's so important to sustain our economy and to be able to enjoy the quality of life, the level of service that the county provides to its residents. We need to have this housing jobs balance, and ideally jobs that are near housing that's near jobs. And benefits obviously being reduced automobile travel, getting the cars off the roads, reduces emissions, expanding housing choices for workers that want to live near where they work, and just overall social vitality. When we're co-locating housing and jobs, that provides opportunities for walking and biking and recreating and just healthy communities. So in Anne Arundel, though, we see a bit of a mismatch there. And these are the trend lines that we're seeing from an employment housing perspective and then also housing growth. So you'll see the trend line for employment and the blue line. We've had slow but steady employment growth with the exception of the pandemic, which, as in most other places, we saw a dip there. But we are back at pre-pandemic employment numbers in the county. And a recent projection that I saw from a local economist out of Towson is the possibility for 15,000 new jobs over the next 5 years. So we need to plan for that. On the other end, on the housing side, we're seeing a decrease, right? And so pre-pandemic, from 2014 to 2019, we were averaging over 2,400 new building permits a year. From 2020 to 2023, it's down to about an average of 1,600 a year. So the housing trend is going in the opposite direction, and that's something that we're going to need to be thinking about as we see our jobs growing and our population growing. And so what does that mean from a workforce perspective? Well, I go out and I talk to businesses. My staff talks to businesses. We're out there, boots on the ground. I saw 77, not personally, but between me and my staff, we visited 77 businesses last week for Business Appreciation Week. The number one issue that I hear from businesses across all sectors and irrespective of size or geography is workforce. It is attracting talent and retaining talent. It's been a huge issue post-pandemic. And in order to attract talent, the biggest barriers for employees to access employment are childcare, transportation, and housing. And obviously, the housing and the transportation piece go hand in hand. The further these workers are from the jobs, the more that becomes a barrier for them to get into these jobs. And that's especially pronounced in the industries that need in-house support. They need workers in the hospitality industry. We have lab workers, we have manufacturers, we have a very robust cyber economy. They need workers that are in secured space, that have to actually be in a building. So we can't be relying on hybrid work. We need to be thinking about how do we bring our workers closer to the jobs. So looking at commuting patterns, I thought this was an interesting slide. About 2/3 of our employees are commuting into Anne Arundel County every week, and about 2/3 of our residents are commuting out. So only a little over 1/3, about 37% of our residents live and work in the county. We need to do something about that. We need to do better. We need to have more opportunities for our residents to work in our county. And where are they coming from? Well, we are seeing some residents coming from areas that are lower cost of living areas, such as PG County and Baltimore City, but it really is a mixed bag. And I think that that is reflective of our diverse economy. We have a very diverse economy with wages on all ends of the wage spectrum, but that demands housing on all ends of the price point, the housing spectrum. We also look at, okay, well, where does talent work and where does talent live in our community? And you'll see the #1 zip code for where talent works is Annapolis, but yet it's #3 on where residents live. Vice versa, the #1 zip code for where talent lives is Pasadena, and they're all the way down at #4. So I think that this is particularly important when it comes to optimizing our decisions about where we want to site housing moving forward. So what can economic development organizations like Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation do? This is my last slide. And so we're a maturing county. Anne Arundel's maturing. Many of our counties in this central region of Maryland are maturing, and we're moving from greenfield development to redevelopment opportunities. There's a number of areas, older commercial areas, that are in need of reinvestment. Many of them are already developed. They're near transit. They're near employment centers. They're in need of reinvestment, and these are great opportunities for mixed income housing, mixed use development patterns. Myself and some of my colleagues across the region that are leading economic development teams are looking at how can we play a role. Counties don't necessarily have redevelopment authorities. PG County does, and they do a great job. Baltimore City has Baltimore Development Corporation. That's another model. But most of the maturing counties don't have redevelopment functions within their counties, and they don't have an independent agency. And so when you're talking about redevelopment, you're talking about complex projects, it is advantageous to have some type of quasi-governmental organization like an economic development organization take on that role. That's a space that we've recently ventured into in Anne Arundel County, thanks to the confidence of our county executive, Steuart Pittman, and support from our county council members. Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation is leasing, and I think that county executive mentioned we're leasing a parcel of land from the county in Glen Burnie. It's great. It is walking distance to a light rail station. It is walking distance to our town center, where there's neighborhoods serving commercial. And we're acting as an agent on behalf of the county to go out to the development community, to get redevelopment on that site, to clean up a site that has been used as a maintenance facility for a long time, and to try to get affordable and or accessible housing that is accessible to the residents that live in that community. So it's a bit of a pilot project for us, but we're hoping to build our capacity in this space. We really appreciate the county's leadership and willingness to kind of let us lead the way here, and hopefully there'll be more opportunities moving forward. The last thing I want to mention is that in addition to this redevelopment work, a number of myself and my colleagues across the state are working at the state level on some legislation. So when Secretary Day talked about it being a housing year, I hope everybody will be in tune to the legislation that we're putting forward that will be expanding the ability for counties to establish redevelopment authorities. In a very small nutshell, and I could do a whole presentation on this, currently there is industrial development authority legislation, and we're trying to expand the ability to use those funds on redevelopment activities, create redevelopment authorities that can then use tax increment financing to finance those activities in jurisdictions across the state. So I'm happy to talk about that at another time, but I know that we're very limited on time, so I'm going to pass it over to Councilwoman Pickard.
scoped out the podium earlier, and I figured I didn't need a stool like Senator Mikulski. I have been compared to her, which is a huge, huge honor. But good morning. This is one of my favorite rooms to be in. I love talking about housing policy. I want to thank the organizers for putting this together for a second annual, and I hope we'll be back for a third and a fourth and a fifth. I'm here to talk about the Housing Attainability Act, but before that, just this weekend, the local paper ran an article stating that 60% of Gen Z renters are cost burdened. You've heard Secretary Day, you've heard Mr. Pittman, you've heard my colleague from Economic Development. The current housing shortage is a generation-defining national emergency. I am incredibly proud to be that fourth vote in Anne Arundel County for the last 6 years. The fourth vote. I'm going to say sometimes we got a fifth, but really, I've been the fourth vote. And guess what? I got reelected. Anne Arundel County has been building our toolbox of housing policy for the last few years. We now have a robust workforce housing policy and elderly of moderate means policy that both target residents who earn 60% and below of area median income. We created a housing trust fund with a dedicated revenue stream. We passed the county's first fair housing law. And on October 7th, we passed the Housing Attainability Act. The policy stands up a new housing program that reimagines how we will build housing in our county. This policy, like all the other tools in our toolbox, is deeply rooted in our general development plan, Plan 2040. In the words of Secretary Day, Anne Arundel County is building an all-of-the-above strategy to the housing shortage. So I did it. Fantastic. Goal number 1, because there are 3 goals to our Housing Attainability Act. We now join neighboring jurisdictions by adding an MPDU policy or a moderately priced dwelling unit mandate for new residential development projects. The Housing Attainability Act requires a 10% threshold of below market units in for sale developments targeting workers earning 80 to 100% area median income, and a 15% threshold of below market units in rental development targeting workers earning 75% of area median income and below. These mandates are some of the highest thresholds in the state. So how are we going to accomplish this? Goal number 2 of the Housing Attainability Act also combats the long-standing exclusionary zoning practices through its mandate to bring attainable price points to residential development that are able to be served by public water and sewer countywide. Exclusive housing policy is tied to economic, education, and even recreational segregation. Ensuring that we are providing attainable housing for residents in all zip codes is vital to creating vibrant and diverse communities. It ensures that people can remain in their communities through all of life stages and opens up affordability in communities of opportunity. Goal number 3 of the Housing Attainability Act is about housing choice. I helped introduce missing middle housing as a concept to the county back in 2022. We pulled together a coalition of stakeholders to bring Dan Porolek of Opticos Design to live casino. All kinds of things happen cool at the casino. We had over 200 people in the room, and we started talking about this concept of middle housing. The Housing Attainability Act adds middle housing dwelling types to our code. In order to make our MPDU program successful, we have recalibrated lot size minimums, parking mandates, bulk regulations to allow for diversity of dwelling types, as the county executive stated, duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, and small multifamily buildings. These housing types are house scale in order to maintain the character of community. That's a big one, guys. You gotta maintain the character of community. While meeting the market demands of our changing demographics. I really love to see the data that we're talking about. As Governor Moore says, data-driven, heart-led. We've really changed the landscape in Anne Arundel County by digging deep into the data, whether it's school capacity or zoning regulations. We know we have to get to a yes. I got off track. By allowing these dwelling types to be built in our communities, we can meet the needs of our essential workers, empty nesters, young professionals, first-time buyers, and young families. By adding these new diverse dwelling types, residential development projects are more likely to reach their maximum allowable density and produce more attainably priced units across the county. As we journeyed through curating this impactful policy, council members, planning staff, producers of housing, and housing activists built a coalition focused on ensuring an increase in affordability while also maintaining our core values, strong environmental stewardship and infrastructure investment. I'm going to say this again. The housing shortage is a generation-defining national emergency. The Anne Arundel County Council is laying the groundwork for a stronger future where action meets vision, and positive impact is inevitable. I'm grateful for the perseverance of our work group. I'm grateful for those who've endorsed the Housing Attainability Act. The new policy grabbed the attention of Secretary Jake Day. Thank you, sir. I wouldn't mind working for you. The Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County, ACT, Anne Arundel, Connecting Together, AARP Maryland, the Anne Arundel County chapter of the NAACP, and so many others. I'm extremely proud of the policy achievement. I look forward to the panel discussions today. I wouldn't be anywhere else today. I'm staying all day, guys. If you're interested in learning, oh, I skipped my thing. These are our supporters. I look forward to the panel discussions today. And if you're interested in learning more about the housing shortage and housing policies, don't hesitate to reach out to me. To access my housing action plan, you can scan this QR code. We do have a lot to do. I'm happy to answer questions when the panel finishes. But we, again, I've been the fourth vote, and I've been leading the vision not only in my community, but for policies countywide. And I don't know what to say after Mr. Day, after Secretary Day speaks. He's right, he's right, he's right. We have to get to a yes. We have to change the status quo, or Maryland is not going to lead in this next decade. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Shaneka Henson. I get the honor and privilege of representing this district in the Maryland House of Delegates. I get the privilege of working with administrations like the one we have now, the Moore Miller administration, and our Secretary Day, who is here to lay out really the groundwork for what's been the governor's platform on housing. He mentioned some of the numbers, but I just want us to sit in those numbers for a second. Our governor had a $575 million capital budget for DHCD this year. That represents a 59% increase in our housing budget for building and maintaining affordable housing in Maryland. A 59% increase, 59%. Most of that money went to the Rental Housing Works program, which I know you all are familiar with, and that program covers those critical shortfalls between what you get in your tax credits and your hard money lending and how you can really close the gaps on those projects, and he's committed to making sure that it has a robust source of income. And that was a year where we had revenue write-downs of $250 million. So when we had the additional money that came from ARPA funding, we all saw housing was a priority, and we were able to flood our housing programs with that money. But then the following years, after we had that sort of support, our revenue wasn't as stable. We certainly didn't have ARPA funding, and we had to get creative with making sure that those programs were sustained, and our governor has done a fantastic job at that. One of the things that I've been privileged to do in the housing space is focus on the quality of affordable housing, is to focus on healthy homes. There is a direct connection between economic development and a healthy home. When we talk to our schools and we see our students who deal with the effects of mold and allergens that are in their home and the days that they miss from school, Well, when a child misses a day from school, if you're a parent, you know, then that parent often misses time from work. You see adults who deal with the effects of hazards that are in their home as well, missing time from work, lost work opportunities, lost productivity because of the conditions of some of the homes. So focusing on how we make sure our affordable housing stock is maintained at high quality is something that I think we have not gotten the largest focus on just yet, but as we continue to build more housing, I'm hoping to really be able to invigorate that conversation and get more people focused on that side of the coin because it's critical. We had a work group that I passed legislation for 2 sessions ago, and it put out the report on October 1st. The work group was surrounded on mold in the home and figuring out what we can do to reduce those instances of mold growth in homes. One of the biggest recommendations out of that work group is going to be making sure that we have licensing standards for our mold remediation professionals. We want to make sure that the process is done with integrity, that if you have an industrial hygienist that comes in and identifies mold, that then you have an independent person that comes in and remediates the mold, so that you can have this 2-step process where one person is fact-checking the other person's work more or less. So we'll put that into place. That's one of our recommendations. Another one is going to be some recommendations to the way that we build and design, making sure that our building envelopes have the appropriate amount of flexibility. We've seen communities that are new that then deal with mold shortly after that. So we really have to get our engineers together and look at our building designs to make sure we're building things sustainable, understanding that mold and moisture, that all that is a part of the natural environment. And then there are conditions we can create inside that makes those things grow in ways that are unhealthy for folks. So we're looking at that, and we'll introduce legislation surrounding it. And the biggest component of what we want to do with this mold work group is education for our tenants and education for our property owners. Our tenants have to understand the rights and responsibilities that come with making sure your home is a healthy environment. We have done so much work in the area of lead-based paint, in the area of carbon monoxide detection, in the area of, you name it, radon. We've done so many things, but when it comes to mold, we really are just at the forefront of making sure there are statewide standards in place to make sure that homes are healthy and free from mold that causes all sorts of awful conditions for people who live with it. So I'm happy to contribute that to what we're doing in the General Assembly. I look forward to those recommendations coming out in legislation and then working with everybody in this room to make sure that the quality product that we put out is workable for you as housing providers and as housing advocates. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Tom Coale. I get to represent housing providers in county council, hearing rooms, in the State House, and in county executive offices. And I'm gonna say a word that I haven't really heard yet this morning, and that's developers. We talk a lot about housing, but we don't often like to use the word developers. And I wanna point out something. In 2008, we had the crash. We have not reached 60% of the housing production that we had in 2008 since that point. We aren't building enough homes. We're not even close. And a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to housing production is saying yes, having a permissive attitude towards development. But I want to change that a little bit in how we advocate for it, because I think we need to start saying please. We need to be soliciting housing development. It is not enough to simply allow development to occur, particularly not with the priorities that we have, particularly not with the deficit that we have for affordable housing. And there's 2 key ways I want to talk about that topic, and I will be quick because we're coming to the end of this panel. The first one is resources, and the second one is mandates. Resources. These projects need to pencil. The developers, the reason why I'm emphasizing the word developers is, and many of you are in this room, these are the people that are putting their money at risk to achieve a state priority. If they cannot get a return on that investment, it will not be built. We're very fortunate to have many nonprofit developers who are building our affordable housing stock, but they need investors that have a project that pencils out. If it doesn't pencil, it won't be built. I was asked to say, what are jurisdictions doing that are helping to address this? And County Executive Pittman addressed a lot of this. It's land, identifying government resources and land. It's funds, housing trust funds. I would suggest to you that the state needs a new bill to change the transfer tax, to put more money in a dedicated affordable housing fund and less money in preserving farm fields that right now can't be developed anyway. And then the third thing is taxes and fees. I'm talking about pilots. I'm talking about waiving fees, such as what Councilwoman Pickard addressed a moment ago. Those are the resources that a locality can bring to the table. The other side of that is mandates. Mandates are expensive. We all have priorities we want to see in our housing production. We can all talk about them in lofty terms, but we do need to understand that they are expensive. And to the extent that these mandates are going to be put onto housing, again, talking about housing as a please instead of a yes, figuring out a way to make sure that bottom line still works for development. I know it is sort of a paradigm shift for many of you to hear development talked about in this way, because we just got out of decades of everyone seeing developers as the big baddies in the room, of the evil developer that's looking to pave paradise and put up a parking lot. But you can't talk about hunger without talking about farmers, and you can't talk about the housing crisis without talking about the people that are building homes. So I hope that as we are talking about saying yes, I hope some of you, when you think about development, you realize that with the crisis that we have right now, it really is about that please. It really is about figuring out a way. The development industry is nowhere near what it needs to be for us to meet the crisis where it is. So when we think about mandates, think about the cost, and when we think about what government can do, a lot of it is resources, just funding the priorities that we have, particularly as it relates to affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. I don't know where we are on time, Pam. Very bad. Do I need to wrap it up? Okay. All right. Well, I mean, the good news is a couple of the questions I had prepared for our panelists revolved around what are you hearing from your stakeholders and your constituents, and I think that they address that, and also what are we missing here in Anne Arundel County. And so I appreciate the comments that Tom left us with, and I do think, what can we do to say, please come and develop, and I think some of the attributes of the Housing Attainability Act really build that in. It's providing incentives and land use incentives and being able to achieve that maximum density, which is awesome. Our Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars, our doors are open. I tell developers that we have a rolling pre-application process. So come in and talk to us. I'll meet with you. We sit down and talk to you about not just our funds, but what other incentives exist in the county, like workforce housing, which gives you a 50% reduction on your water sewer connection fees, for LIHTC deals and other affordable housing, even if you're not doing MPDU units, the many other things. So we're happy to do that. But I do think, too, we need to have a conversation around preservation and what can we do to keep the units that we already have that might be market rate and naturally occurring affordable housing units as well. What can we do about that? And there are a number of other jurisdictions that have looked at that. I think an effective policy has been really looking at like if you look at Prince George's County and their right of first refusal policy. Also, other jurisdictions have brought in partners, private developers that are market rate developers, to provide some payment in lieu of taxes in exchange for keeping those market rates affordable and doing deed restrictions. So we'll be exploring those, and I welcome comments and ideas from you all. As County Executive Pittman said, please check in to see our listening session at 2 p.m. today, or is it 2:30 p.m., and give us your ideas. We not only want to hear from you what the needs you're seeing in the community, but what do you think we should be doing here in Anne Arundel County? So help me thank my panelists. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Erin. That really was a fascinating and very diverse panel. Thank you very much, panelists. Moving right along quickly, panel 2, sponsored by Whiting Turner. Thank you so much, Whiting Turner. We're talking about Anne Arundel County fair housing, accessory, and moderately priced dwelling units. And our moderator is our own lovely councilwoman, Lisa Rodvien.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Rodvien, and I represent District 6 in the Anne Arundel County Council, and I couldn't not welcome you to District 6, so I hope you're enjoying your day here. We have 3 different topics that we're going to try and cover through the course of our panel, which are fair housing, accessory dwelling units, and MPDUs. And even though I think probably 90% of the folks in the room know what ADUs and MPDUs stand for, I just want to take a minute to make sure. Accessory dwelling units are basically a second dwelling that could go with a house. So it could be detached, it could be a basement apartment, it could be an above garage apartment. So we're just gonna call them ADUs, accessory dwelling units. An MPDU, a moderately priced dwelling unit, is what all those words together sound like. It's something more affordable, which, as you can see from the discussion we've had so far, is lacking. And so we recently passed legislation, on all 3 of those topics. The county has undertaken fair housing, ADUs, and MPDUs to try and create more of those because we know that those are our paths to affordable housing in our county. So I'd like to actually ask, our panel's gonna be a little different than the last one, and hopefully we'll cover some of those topics that were mentioned at the very end in terms of having conversations with developers, because we have some folks in our panel who are developers. And so I'd like to just take a moment and ask each of them to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Mr. Curtis Adams.
Good morning. Curtis Adams. I'm a vice president with Conifer. We are a New York-based real estate development company, but we have a Mid-Atlantic office based in Columbia, Maryland. Our future office is going to be here in Anne Arundel County. We are the developer of Blue Oaks at North Odenton. Secretary Day mentioned the project earlier in his speech. There'll be 150 units just a mile outside of the Mark Metro Station in Odenton. 150 units I mentioned, all affordable, and it all falls within the MPDU requirements. And I'll talk about the benefits that we benefited from. I would say our project was a bellwether to what the new legislation will do for future developments in the county.
Hello, everyone. My name is Grant Searfoss. I'm the Vice President of Severn Development. We are an affordable housing developer located right here in Annapolis. Across Maryland and Delaware, we both own and manage affordable housing units. We manage about 4,500 units and own about 2/3 of that.
Well, yeah, we'll do them in a minute. Or actually, why don't you go ahead and do them now?
I think there's a couple of slides that I have that go with my introductory remarks. You see heads shaking? No. Okay, no slides. I'll freestyle it then. I am Lori Benner. I am the Associate Vice President of Housing and Community Development with the National Fair Housing Alliance, NAFA. We are a civil rights nonprofit organization, the only national nonprofit entirely dedicated to eliminating discrimination in housing. And I'll expand on that to say that sounds like a very narrow charge, but we operate from the perspective of where you live matters, in that the location of your home determines your access or lack of access to everything you need to live a healthy and economically prosperous life. And so just beyond the home itself, it goes to transportation and education and healthcare and food and all of those accesses that I mentioned before. So my remarks today will come from that broader lens.
I'm Greg Cantori. I run a company called Little Deeds, so everything we do is about small stuff. I'm a housing developer, affordable housing developer in recovery. I used to be head of Light Street Housing, where we did housing for the homeless in Baltimore City, and used sometimes 16 sources of funding just for one project. Just one project. Just give you an idea of the barriers of developing affordable housing out there. And I'm here to talk about accessory dwelling units, which are also small as well, and what we've been able to do here in the county, which has been very exciting.
Thank you. I'm going to come and have a seat with y'all.
And second, the 16 sources of funds to get affordable housing developed.
And third.
So we're going to kind of take these topics one at a time, and we're going to start with fair housing. And I'd like to just note that one of the proudest accomplishments that I have and my colleagues on the council have is passing a local fair housing bill. We covered all different kinds of categories where people find themselves discriminated against, but one of the ones that I think is most notable is income type. And so our fair housing law prevents discrimination based on income type, and that was, I think, a huge step forward. So I'd like to just talk about for a minute, what do you see as the current challenges in the world of fair housing? What do you see, where do you see the obstacles that still exist?
I don't know that I can really offer anything profound and new over what we've heard from literally every speaker so far this morning. Some of the biggest challenges are, frankly, our friends, colleagues, neighbors who are not in this room, the ones who constantly battle against housing issues, housing opportunity issues. One of my one of my neighbor friends from Pasadena and member of the One Pasadena community group is here, and he and I are constantly tagging each other in on Facebook arguments, if you will, from opponents of fair housing and housing issues. You know, there's this new bus line that's providing some transportation, and the people in our community just went nuts about it, about all the crime that it's going to bring to our neighborhoods, as if criminals love to take an hour-long bus ride and then steal your big screen TV and carry it back on public transportation with them. Like, it's the most bizarre argument I've ever heard in my life. And zoning, there was some property that they were desirous of rezoning to build some affordable housing or some housing, and again, people lost their minds about that. So there's the people, the NIMBYs, and then there's also this political climate, this divisive political climate when it comes to housing issues, and part of that is really, I'm going to call it a failure of positive communication and effective communication about housing and housing issues, because it's always those people that, you're going to bring all those people into our neighborhoods, whoever those people happen to be, rather than making it into an issue of all of us, everyone. We keep hearing about the income barriers and additional barriers to affordable and attainable, and these terms that we use are sometimes terms of art that just don't adequately communicate about housing issues.
Thank you.
And I can perhaps speak to fair housing from a developer and manager perspective. I started in the industry in 2007 in Virginia, and then I worked my way up, met a woman, moved to Baltimore. Here I am, primarily in Maryland. When I started in 2007, even in the affordable housing industry, we had much stricter rules for renters, for people coming to our affordable properties. We looked much more stricter at people's records. That could be a marijuana charge when they were 18, to other offenses. We also looked much more stricter at credit scores. We were more selective. I think we're trying to meet the expectations of the communities that we were in. I've seen over the past 15 years, I think we've relaxed many of the requirements. We've made it easier for families to come in and for individuals to come in. And I think our industry has generally become more understanding. Now, some of it, I'm sure we can go through to some state housing finance and agency requirements, but I also think this industry has also become just more sympathetic at the same time.
I have something just to add about the fact that now our fair housing, just to let everyone know, is basically complaint driven. In other words, when you feel like you've been discriminated against, you have to complain. Years ago, there used to be a group called Baltimore Neighborhoods, and some of you may have remembered that. That was a fair housing testing organization. I was one of the white testers. So I actually got to go in as a white guy and try to rent a unit or purchase a house and look at the mortgage. And then they would go ahead and have the same person with the same demographics as myself do the exact same thing within hours or a day after, and they would compare the two results to see whether or not there was discrimination. That is not really going on right now. It's a real miss for us because there's a lot of discrimination going on out there that folks will not complain about. And it took us as volunteer testers to make that come out. And the penalties for being found were very severe. And we don't have, those penalties still are there, but we don't have that proactive aspect of fair housing that we need to bring back again. I really do believe it.
I do want to comment. I believe our Human Relations Commission does have that ability. The question is, do they have the capacity to do it? Do they have the, do they have the bandwidth, and do they have the support to really have any sort of testing program? So if there's someone out there that can correct me, please do, but I believe that's the case.
I think it's important to also definitionally determine which type of fair housing we're talking about, because as a manager of existing properties, I think about actual fair housing issues we deal with on a daily basis, and I could talk to some of those. I think the biggest one we face that's a true challenge is accessibility issues. It's easier when we're doing a new development. It's easier when we're doing a redevelopment. There's budgets, there's dollars. What about a property that's 30 years old, barely hanging on, is federally subsidized, so therefore you are responsible financially for any reasonable accommodation. And those reasonable accommodations are expensive. Those are some of the challenges we face. There are some solutions coming out. One thing that we've been finding helpful is insurers are actually stepping up, and if they will come in and both kind of quantify and verify the reasonable accommodation and get those reasonable accommodations both passed and paid for from the insurance. AmeriHealth is one that we've noticed, and some others actually helping with that. Kind of then on the greater spectrum, which is how do we create fair housing, structurally, and getting people close to where they need to be and where they need to live. I mean, I do almost entirely low-income housing tax credit projects. That is a great way to be able to build. I mean, the state is incentivizing construction of new projects near metros. It's a great combination because not only are these people able to afford the rent, they're also not transportation burdened. So there's a lot of things that can happen. There's a lot of things going on at the state, thanks to Secretary Day and a lot of the staff over there. But I think there's a lot of strides in the right direction right now, and I think the future is positive on this.
Thank you. Since we're so short on time, we're going to move on to our next subject, which is accessory dwelling units. And so let's go ahead and combine our conversation to talk about what the challenges that we see, as well as possible solutions for accessory dwelling units. And just a very quick overview of our law. In Anne Arundel County, accessory dwelling units were allowed, but it was a pretty narrow band. Detached accessory dwelling units were not allowed, and adding that type is a big deal. We were able to get rid of some of the parking restrictions that often made an accessory dwelling unit complicated, or that will help facilitate them in the future. And they're currently allowed up to 800 square feet, which in some periods in our history just used to be called a dwelling unit, was just a normal house size. But we now know that 4,000 square foot homes are quite common, and 800 is now considered an accessory dwelling unit. So I'll let you guys talk about the challenges and possible solutions that you see for getting more of this home type built.
Is it okay if I chime in first?
Absolutely.
This is near and dear to me. And I want to let you know that Anne Arundel County, and Allison, this is important to remember, is that you weren't the fourth vote. You were 4 of 7 votes in favor. 4 of 7. We had a 7-0 majority passing the accessory dwelling unit bill in Anne Arundel County. And I also wanted to let you know that Anne Arundel County has the best accessory dwelling bill in the state of Maryland. We exceeded Montgomery counties. And what I mean by best, it means the least number of restrictions: parking, location, style, who can live there. Baltimore County requires you to be a blood relative. Think about that. What does that mean? Think about that. So Anne Arundel County, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. We have, now, saying that, the challenge is that we have a law in the books, but we've only developed a small number. A lot of people came out to protest saying this is going to destroy, there goes the character of the neighborhood issue, destroy the character of the neighborhood. The reality is, I think we've only had, 20?
Let me share those statistics because I have them right here in front of me. We've had since 2023, I think about May 2023 when this law passed, so a little year and a half-ish, We've had 47 applications. We've had 18 permits issued, and we have 9 certificate of occupancy. So we actually only have 9 that are being lived in. So we definitely need to figure out, okay, how do we bust open the doors to make our accessory dwelling unit program more successful? And so I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this.
And to take that one step, California, 10 years ago, only 1% of permits, so it's very similar to Anne Arundel County. They passed a lot of great laws for ADUs. Only 1% of the permits were accessory dwelling units. Does anyone have an idea of what percentage in California today are accessory dwelling unit? Throw out some numbers. 24 what percent? That's almost exactly right. Wow, you win the prize. That's right, 24%. Can you imagine that? 24% of new housing units are accessory dwelling units. And I'm going to take it one step further. And I talked about this during the bill that we got passed. We talked about ADU 2.0. So we got the bill on the books. We also talked about the fact we need to move beyond permitting to promoting the bill. So we need to market them or promote them. So I am going to go ahead and propose that our county have an ADDO, an ADO office. It stands for Latin for add-on, Accessory Dwelling Development Office. And that basically has navigators that help promote, market, and finance accessory dwelling units. Did you know some states actually give you $20,000 to $40,000 to build an ADU? That's how much they want you to build an ADU in your neighborhood. And you also know that even the numbers that we're talking about, if we were to go to 20% of accessory dwelling units being the 20% of permits out there, that it still would only be about 1 out of every 100 housing units. So it's not going to destroy any neighborhood. And last thing I want to say about it is that right now we're just talking about accessory dwelling. You know, it could be a separate unit, it could be a garage conversion, it could be a basement, right? California can allow you to have as many as 4 units on a property, and they do it through something called a junior accessory dwelling unit. Has anyone ever heard of a junior accessory dwelling unit? Okay, so that's something we need to do here too. That's a smaller unit within the house that may share other common spaces. That's an addition. So imagine this. You have your house, you have a 2-car garage. You convert the 2-car garage to an accessory dwelling unit. You then create a junior accessory dwelling unit within your own home. And then, in the backyard, you create a MADU. Does anyone know what that is? It's a movable accessory dwelling unit. And California allows and promotes movable accessory dwelling units. And this is where the magic starts, because accessory dwelling units that are movable are extremely affordable and flexible. It means you can own your home while you're renting, and you can move your home to another location when your job changes into somebody else's backyard. This is true, yes, in my backyard stuff. So you can have 4 ADUs on a single property in California.
So the good news is we do have some role models out there that we can follow. California, because their housing crisis has been so severe, they have, been very aggressive in addressing the crisis. I did want to mention that one of the topics that I've heard about is septic, and a lot of the county is not on public sewer, and so figuring out how right now state law requires that an accessory dwelling unit, a detached one, have a separate septic unit, and that's one of our big obstacles right now. And I would imagine that's something that at least needs to be figured out. How do you do that for a movable accessory dwelling unit? But I'm all up for challenges, and let's figure it out. Let's not call it a roadblock and make it stop for us, but make it an obstacle that we need to figure out how to overcome. Any other thoughts on ADUs?
Greg answered it exactly as I would have.
That's awesome. We're great. We're on the same page. So let's talk about briefly our newest type, or our newest legislation, which is MPDUs, our Housing Attainability Act, moderately priced dwelling units. And just a quick overview, if you are doing a development sized 1 through 9 units, you are not required to create MPDUs. If you are 10 to 19, you are required to do MPDUs except if you meet a few small exceptions. So our law basically does expect that if you are in that 10 to 19 zone, the size of your project, that you will be including MPDUs in the project. There are a few small exceptions where we recognize that, you know, it will be impossible to, quote, pencil out, as one of our speakers in the last group mentioned. Mr. Coale was that gentleman. And then once you hit 20, you are required. There are no exceptions once you hit 20 in your size of the project. As part of the law, you also get some flexibility in housing types. We talked about, you know, you can have duplexes, triplexes, and quads in what are now currently single-family zones, and that will help break down some of the real segregation that we have in terms of you know, our housing stock. So I'd love to hear what you see as the challenges and additional solutions. Hopefully this bill the bill we just passed is a solution, but we're ready for more. So take it away.
A huge benefit to the bill for projects over 20 units. In Conifer, we have 22 properties. In Maryland, all of them are 30 or more units, is the 50% reduction in the capital facilities connection fee in Anne Arundel County. I'll use Blue Oaks at North Odenton as an example. I'll just call it the CFCC. It's a charge of water connection and sewer connection. On 150 units at North Odenton, we would have had to spend $2.4 million. It's hard to believe when I say it out loud. That's what would have been our connection fees in Anne Arundel County to build new, because they're only they count by, you know, connections to the water system. We only had 5 unit credits, and we were building 150 units. With that 50% reduction, we went from 2.4 down to technically 1.17 million. So that's $7,800 a unit instead of $15,600 a unit. Speaking to Tom Cole's point just about how it's hard to pencil these deals, if we had not had that 50% reduction, which, by the way, was not part of the MPDU legislation, we got it because we got an ACDS loan from the county, and there was a workforce housing agreement where we got that reduction, we would not have been able to close, especially with interest rates going up since November of 22, or excuse me, the fall of 22. Combine that with insurance rates going from $500 a unit to over $1,000 in an 8-year period, and other costs. So that's just as huge. It makes our business able to operate, I would say.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is everything does cost money, and setting rents is how you effectively determine how much debt you can take on a project, which is how you determine whether or not you can make it financially feasible. So something like this, being paired with incentives provided by the county, is really the ticket. I mean, to just do this but not have other county-wide help may be difficult, but I think, again, when you add in those factors and the cooperativeness of the county to step in and kind of help fill those gaps, you do create the scenario where you say, hey, we're going to require this because we have a goal and a mission of affordability, but we're not going to leave you out to dry. We're going to provide you with incentives and ways to help get these projects funded, because even developers who want to do affordable, like we're for-profit, but we're mission-driven. Everything we do is affordable. If a deal doesn't pencil, I can't make it more affordable just for the sake of making it affordable. So again, it's a cooperativeness between the county and the developers, county restrictions and requirements, county incentives, and ways to help get deals funded.
I want to just ask, how have interest rates affected your work in the past few years? We know that home buyers have been impacted. I would imagine that is impacting developers as well.
The way I like to say it sort of jokingly is the mindset for finding new projects and finding deals has gone from where can I develop that the economics work to where can I develop that the counties and jurisdictions are willing to help enough to make the projects work. It's had a major impact. The only shining light really is that there has been, in my opinion, an overwhelming support by counties in Maryland to help get these projects off the ground. And I think these counties and cities helping fill in the gaps has been almost the only reason that probably 50% plus of these projects that are getting through and actually closing are getting through and closing.
I completely agree. It's soft funds. It's because we can only pay so much. I'm sorry if I'm using esoteric terms. We can only afford to pay so much debt. We need soft funds. And what is soft funds? That's money A big source is Maryland CDA, Maryland DHCD. So the governor supporting a $559 million budget for Maryland DHCD will allow dozens of projects to happen in the next couple of years that normally would never have happened.
And so hopefully our housing trust fund in Anne Arundel County, or our affordable housing trust fund, can actually help play a role in that as well at the county level.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
I'm very curious about the alphabet soup of affordable housing subsidies and so on. So back in my time, I said 16. You name what you need to put together in order to put together a affordable housing. What's a typical list?
It ranges. In Anne Arundel County, I would say it made our last project, and by the way, we also have a project under construction in Baltimore City right now and in Frederick County. In Anne Arundel County, ACDS stepping in, able to find those funds was very valuable. We used to be able to go to Federal Home Loan Bank and get those sources of funds, but it's harder. The scoring, unless the government's contributing the land, you're just not competitive anymore. So I would say the state has been the main source of funding. There's not just rental housing works on a 4% deal, but there's Weinberg funds, there's community legacy funds, and other sources.
Yeah, I mean, I could give some examples. So I'll think of two very recent Baltimore City deals I'm working on. One is an adaptive reuse of historic school. That is going to use low-income housing tax credits, historic federal tax credits, historic state tax credits. It will use rental housing works. It will use bonds from the state of Maryland, and it will have private debt in it as well. Another project is a twin ground up, and a twin means you take both competitive 9% and also 4% LIHTCs. I mean, each side of that is different, but just on the 9 we have tax credits, rental housing funds. We have a home loan from the city of Baltimore. We have vouchers that were awarded on the 4% side, which again, this is one single project, one building. But on the other side, we have bonds, rental housing works, and additional debt from the syndicator in addition to LIHTC. So, you know, I'm running out of fingers.
And Grant, I would you agree that project-based vouchers are very valuable? We tried in a twin deal. You go to 8, you don't go to 9, then that triggers Davis-Bacon and higher wages.
Could I interrupt briefly just to ask one of you to give a little bit more explanation? What does that mean, a twin deal?
Sure. So there are two types of low-income housing tax credit projects. One is using 9% tax credits, which means, without getting too into basis and things, you know, if you have a project, you get roughly 90% of it as a federal tax credit, which you then sell to an investor, and it comes back to the project as equity. A 4% side, the 4% tax credits are the exact same thing, but ultimately it's about 40% of the project that you sell and then get back as equity. 9% are extremely competitive in the state of Maryland. 4% are not competitive, but there are other factors that limit the amount of production you could do, such as bond capacity of the state. Maryland's a net neutral state, so we don't typically have capacity issues. The issue is actually all of the deals need rental housing works, which Secretary Daya talked about, to really get across the finish line, just the way the math works. But the difference is really competitive, but you get a lot more. In those projects, you typically target a very low income threshold. On the 4% side, it's a higher average median income threshold typically, but you get a lot less, so they're more debt heavy.
In the same deal, you're using the 4% and the 9%, just to make that clear. So before the twin, we were doing deals, a 4% deal or a 9%. Because costs have gone up, figured out, hey, we could use both those sources. So one single parcel, you subdivide it, but it can be the same project with double the funds.
Thank you. No, I was just going to say thank you, and thank you for just letting us know that this is, you know, not an easy, you know, coming up with the financing is a really big challenge for developers creating affordable housing. So thank you for tackling it by all means.
I wanted to add that you can see how complex it is to put together an affordable housing unit. Now imagine you're a homeowner and you want to do an accessory dwelling unit. This is one of the reasons why there's so many barriers, is that there are grants and loans available under certain circumstances. There's some low interest loans that might be available under certain instances. But how does a homeowner know about that? How do they cobble all that together? So most ADUs are now being built by high-income individuals. And that's what they're using. They have cash, they can build it, they can go through the permitting, they can even pay for a permit navigator. There are people, believe it or not, that do that. They're full-time paid staff that go out and to do permits for you. So, but the rest of us who want to develop an affordable ADU for our grandparent, our parent, our child, our disabled person, whatever it is out there, they don't have that resources. So having a navigation office for us less sophisticated homeowners is really going to be critical, because you can see how complicated. It's a full-time job.
Yeah, and you mentioned that was, you were cobbling together all of those different sources for just a single structure, a project that was in a single structure.
Yeah, single structure, from the outside, you wouldn't even realize it was two projects. You would think it was all one. Yeah.
Well, I would just like to, I actually am hoping that maybe we can help get our schedule back on track, but I'd just like to offer each of you an opportunity to just make any closing remarks about, what you'd like to see Anne Arundel County do, because we don't quite have a quorum here, but you do have 3 legislators in the room, and we're open to ideas. And I know, Mr. Cantori, you've already mentioned some, but by all means, share more.
Well, one of the funny things is we started off the conversation today about people living on boats. Well, I'm actually one of those. So 7 years, we sold our land-based property and sold it 7 years ago, and have been on a sailboat ever since, and we love it, and in Eastport. Also, I'm an owner, was an owner just recently of a tiny home on wheels, an MADU, a movable accessory dwelling unit, which unfortunately is illegal in the state of Maryland. And there's no county in the state of Maryland that allows them at this point, technically. So I actually sold it to a couple. I just want to tell you this story because it's important to hear. A couple in their 20s, in their mid-20s, who were able to buy it. I bought it for $22,000. It's a beautiful home. It was actually on the feature cover of Washington Post. So if you're thinking this is some kind of a yucky-looking RV, it's not. It's a beautiful home with 16 windows, a celestial ceiling in it, 2 lofts, a full bathroom, 2 full bedrooms, and a kitchen. Okay, $22,000, okay? I sold it to them for $44,000 10 years later. I doubled my money on it. But is that affordable? Yeah. So they're moving it into the backyard of their parents' house illegally. I won't tell you where it is. Okay? And their rent will be $300 a month, and their mortgage payment is $225 a month. They have no utility bills because it's off-grid. We designed this house to be an off-grid home, solar power on it. I told them, when you turn 30, I expect you both to have $100,000 in the bank. And someday when you sell the house, you'll probably be able to sell it for about $70,000. Okay. Excuse me? You won't believe the square footage. 190 square feet. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
It's road legal. We drove it to West Virginia. We drove it to Pasadena. We drove it to Kansas. So I just want to let you know the possibilities are amazing for movable accessory dwelling units.
Thank you. Hopefully that's something we can work on at the state and county. We'll take some questions. Let's go ahead and take a question because it sounds like it's relevant to this. We'll be sure to bring that next time. And you know what? I'll collect some and post them on my Facebook page. Look for Lisa Rodvien, and I've got some examples that'll be great for this conversation. Yeah. Oh, is there? Yes. Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. I knew a little bit, but you just shared a lot, so I'm glad to hear that that's happening.
Yes, thank you for that. Because I work at the national level, I'll speak from that perspective, and also because we didn't really get to the opportunity part of our conversation. You know, we talk about barriers all day long, but we want to know what are the solutions, what can we do about it. And so I will briefly lift up two areas of opportunity that have potential. And you would think these are, you know, brand new, innovative, cool things, but they're not. Frankly, they're older than me. And one is that if we can finally fully enforce the Fair Housing Act, and specifically a provision of the Fair Housing Act known as Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, AFFH. The Baltimore region is currently in process of developing its most recent, and Anne Arundel County is part of that Baltimore region, its most recent analysis of impediments to fair housing. And so that, you know, surveys and develops strategies and solutions to affirmatively, to positively bring forth fair and affordable housing options in the region. And the second I will lift up is special purpose credit programs. Is anyone familiar with special purpose credit programs, SPCPs? Oh, good. I love this part. So SPCPs were made allowable by the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974. And what those do is allow lenders to create a loan program for an economically disadvantaged group of people who share a protected class. So in layman's terms, a lender can create a loan program specifically for Black individuals, specifically for Hispanic Latino individuals. And there's a whole variety of reasons why they have not been widely used up until very recently, but we're starting to see a lot more of them come on the market. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones that are being created are place-based rather than people-based. Not my favorite, because I think they can perpetuate segregation, but these are very, very promising tools. And they're not just for home loans in the housing space, they're used in the small business space. So I want to see special purpose credit programs all over the place, everywhere, and we can develop them right here in Anne Arundel County. So those are two very promising solutions to move things forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's news to a lot of us in the room, and so that's really great that now you have a whole room full of people that are aware of that possibility that we didn't know existed. This is definitely, you're absolutely, hitting the nail on the head with one of the biggest challenges. To me, this is a piece where next Tuesday's election could not be more important, because we've seen administrations that have had invested in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and then we have seen administrations that have disinvested. And I think that investment at the national level could be critical here. That's something we can certainly look at the county level as well. Maintaining affordable housing is equally important to creating new affordable housing. The council had some LIHTC programs that came up that they needed to be renewed. And if those don't get renewed, then, we literally could have, thousands of people that currently have homes now have an apartment that's market-based rent and no longer be able to afford the place that they're actually living in. So I think that's another place where we can look at using our Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Ways that county can help. I'm a LIHTC developer, so I'm a hammer, everything's a nail. There's really a couple key things. One, zoning, permitting, ease. Make it easier to build more units. If I can build 32 units, the deal might not work. If I can build 58 units, the deal might work, just because you gain the economies of scale. And the next two are really monetary based, which is housing trust funds, giving soft funds to projects that need it. If they go through the LIHTC program, they're pretty well vetted projects. They're typically, being vetted 3, 4, 5 times by different parties involved in the deal financially. And lastly, vouchers as a way to give long-term operational sustainability to a project, but also most lenders have gotten comfortable now underwriting those voucher rents. So giving vouchers isn't a huge upfront cost, it's a large long-term cost, but the upfront impact is that you can take more debt and therefore build more projects.
I agree with all 3 points, and I just want to double down on make development easier. By right zoning, the state has already passed a law where you can have upzoning around metro stations, but if the counties, not just Anne Arundel County, but throughout the state, if we could just build upon that and expand those definitions and allow developers to build more density, that'd be just a big boom for affordable housing in the state.
And I just wanted to say I'm really proud that that's one of the things that our Housing Attainability Act did, is allows opportunities for increased density, and hopefully actually allows it in ways that are possible, not just saying we're going to do it, but here are how we're going to help you get there.
And by right is so important because that is such a great job in doing that, because it removes the arbitrary aspect and frankly, all the NIMBY opposition that we see out there, because unless someone can show that something has a health or safety risk on there, you can go ahead and build. And I think that's just great to see. I have a quick question. How many people have read The Color of Law? Oh, that's great. If you haven't, I highly recommend that, because that will help understand the systemic issues that we've been talking about. The Color of Law, I consider sort of the Bible of affordable housing and housing discrimination, and why we are where we are right now.
Well, I know it's tough for panelists to be the panel that's between us and between the audience and lunch, so I'd like to give our panelists a big round of applause. And thank you so much for bringing your expertise and your knowledge of your different subject areas today. Your sharing your knowledge is greatly, greatly appreciated and will benefit our county, so thank you so much.
Hang on one sec.
Oh, wait.
Before you all rush off to lunch, 2 things. First of all, during the break, someone pointed out to me that we really have not talked about the enormous racial inequity that is part of our issues with housing. I have all the data for that, and Heather and Dave, I think we need to do a whole panel on that next year, because we have not really dug into that, and it is baked in, as you were saying, it's baked into our housing crisis. So I make a commitment, I will pull that data, and we will do that next year.